Hey guys, so as you're probably aware, since about 2020, the start of COVID, housing in the US has absolutely exploded in price, and it doesn't seem like it's slowing down anytime soon. And so this has caused a lot of people to look for alternative housing, alternative affordable housing. And one of the very common options that people have decided on is RV living. And RVs are cheap and they've got pretty much everything that a person needs to live reasonably comfortably. And so, just for an example, you could buy an RV that's livable for under $1,000. Now it's going to be an old RV. It's probably not going to be in very good shape, and it's not going to be very big probably for that price, and it's going to need a lot of work. But it is doable. So since there has been a very strong trend towards people living in RVs, I thought I would do a video to explain the two biggest challenges that people will run into if they're living in an RV. Now, I lived in my RV for 4 years while I was finding a forever property and built a house. So, the first one, and in my opinion, the most important one, is that RVs break down very often. They're built with really cheap materials, and they weren't made to be lived in full time. So they well, not only do they break down very often because they're built with really cheap materials, but they're also very difficult to work on because they are so small compared to a house. For example, so many of the systems in an RV, like let's just take the furnace, for example. Well, typically the furnace will be tucked into a little cubby hole, which is very difficult to access. And things like plumbing can be in very, very tight spots that are sometimes almost impossible to get to. So this makes them very difficult to work on. Not only that, but probably if you buy a very old RV, let's say something that's 20 plus years old, the parts manufacturers quit making parts for many RVs once they get to that threshold, which, from what I understand from my RV tech friend, is around 20 years old. So that means that you may not even be able to find the parts that you really need to fix your RV right, and may have to do something else as a workaround, which probably, almost certainly will not be ideal. The second thing is that since the RV will be breaking down very frequently, especially because it's not made to be lived in full time, you will either have to do the repairs yourself, or you'll have to pay someone to do those repairs, obviously. And the problem with paying someone else is that your typical RV repair service will charge you $100+ an hour. And that doesn't even include a service call to come out and fix your RV on site. Now, my friend who has an RV repair service, he charges $150 an hour, okay? And he's not the most expensive out there by any stretch. If you get lucky, you might find somebody that charges $100 an hour. So given the fact that your RV is going to be breaking down very frequently, and you're going to have to pay somebody to fix it if you don't have the skills, it's going to get very expensive very quickly. Okay? You might expect repairs on a monthly basis for an old RV that's not in good shape and it hasn't had a lot of parts replaced already. Now, according to my friend, his average ticket is about $500 for a repair. Okay, so I'm not a mathematician, but if the average repair is $500 and you have one repair per month, well, that's $500 a month in repairs, right? And that just took your cheap housing out of the cheap zone, let's say. So that's really not a good option. So the other two options are to either learn how to repair it yourself, which takes time, obviously. If you don't have any handy person skills to start with, there's going to be a very steep learning curve, and it's going to take you a long time to learn the trades in order to repair your RV yourself. Okay? The other option is to try to find a typical handyman type locally that typically they might charge $25 an hour or somewhere in that ballpark. Okay? I lived in my RV for 2 years, and I got really lucky that I found a good handyman for right about $20 an hour. Now, the first 2 years that I lived in my RV, I did the repairs myself because I have the skills, already had the skills to do it. Now, the other thing is that there are caveats to that, because an RV isn't exactly the same as repairing a house. So if your handyman doesn't have any experience with RVs, he's probably never experienced a converter, for example. That's part of the electric system, and that converts 12 volts from a battery into 120 volts, so that, or excuse me, it converts 120 volts to 12 volts so that you can run your 12 volt appliances in your RV. And if he's never experienced that, then he might have no clue how to replace that converter, etc. And the furnace systems are different than a standard house. So those are just a couple of examples where a standard handyman might not have the skills to repair certain things in the RV. Of course, he can figure it out like anybody could probably, but that just means that it's going to take him a lot longer to do it because he's got to figure it out as he goes. And so that $20 an hour may end up being more like $60 an hour, which again could get very expensive. I mean, you could be talking $200 or $300 a month at that rate just for repairs. So I would recommend that you consider finding a handyman who can do your repairs while you learn to do the repairs yourself. Okay? Otherwise, it could get very expensive and just make living in an RV not affordable. Okay? So that's the first major issue with living in an RV. The second one that I want to talk about on this video is the cost for utilities. And if you live in a very moderate climate, your utility costs could be very reasonable and maybe wouldn't be an issue. But if you live in the deep south, for example, and let's say that you don't have any shade on your RV spot, then your air conditioner might be running 24/7, literally, because RVs have very little insulation. They are not energy efficient whatsoever. As a matter of fact, they're about the worst possible option. So, not only could your electric bill be $200 or $300 a month just to run your air conditioner, but your air conditioner may not last very long because you are running it 24/7, and again, these things are not meant to be lived in full time. So if you have to replace your air conditioner every other season, well, to replace an air conditioner, you're probably looking at about $1,000. Okay, so you could just add $50 or $40 a month just for replacing your air conditioner every 2 years. And it may not last 2 years. I mean, it may only last 1 year, which would mean $80 a month just to replace your air conditioner. So now that's air conditioning. If you live in the north of the country where it's cold, then your heating bills could be $500 plus, if you can believe that. So I live in northern Alabama, right near Chattanooga, Tennessee. And for me to heat my 32-foot one-bedroom fifth wheel, if I want to keep it at a reasonably warm temperature, like 70 degrees, would be around $400 per month. And that's in northern Alabama. Okay, so you can imagine if you were, let's say you're in North Michigan or somewhere even Canada, your bills might, your heating bill might be $800 a month. That's very possible. So now, and the reason is, like I said, that RVs are not insulated well at all, and they typically have a lot of windows, because when you're RVing, you like to see the outdoors, right? And so that's why they put a lot of windows in them. But those windows are extremely cheap, and they're single pane glass, whereas your typical house nowadays has double pane glass, or insulated glass it's called, and the heat retaining value or cool retaining value of double pane windows is like twice what it is for single pane windows. So that is a huge factor right there, that you're letting in way more heat or way more cold because the windows are so cheap. Now, one way to make a significant improvement in the energy efficiency of an RV is to use shrink plastic over the windows. Okay, now that's not really necessary in most houses, again, because they already have 2 panes of glass instead of 1. My estimate is that using that shrink plastic on the windows in an RV could add or could reduce your heating costs by potentially 25%. Depends on how many windows you have. And of course, the other thing is that, I shouldn't say of course, most people probably don't know this, but RVs are not sealed very well at all typically. And so they leak a lot of heat and cold. And so if you can find those areas where you're getting infiltration of either heat or cold into your RV, you can buy some caulk and some weather stripping, and you can seal those areas up so that you're not leaking so much energy. Now, the third thing that you can do is you can insulate the underneath of the RV, because obviously RVs are on wheels, and They are sitting off the ground, and so cold air can just get underneath the RV and suck out a lot of heat. And so there are a few pretty obvious options to do that. One would be just using straw bales and just stuffing them underneath the RV. The issue with straw bales is that they are going to massively attract rodents, and if your RV is not sealed up well, if there are gaps where the rodents can get into your RV, that's just going to bring the rodents to your RV. I mean, they're going to be attracted to it regardless because it's going to be warm. But I think the straw bales are really going to attract even more rodents. But that is a cheap, simple option. Stuff the straw bales underneath, and if you seal up the RV so that there are no holes where the rodents can get in, you should be good, even if there are rodents that are living in those straw bales. The other option would be to take loose fiber insulation, technically known as cellulose, and you could stuff that into garbage bags and just make sure you seal those up well and stuff those underneath the RV. So those are a couple options. There are probably other options that you could find on other videos, but those are the two main options that come to mind. So between all three of those strategies for insulating and reducing the infiltration of heat and cold into your RV, you could probably reduce your utility bill by maybe 30 to 40%. I think that's a reasonable number. So if you're living up north, your bill might be $800 or $900 a month. If you don't do anything, if you do all three of those things I mentioned, it might only be $500 a month. So it's still not cheap, obviously. The other strategy that I used in the 4 years that I lived in my RV is I had a 32-foot fifth wheel, one bedroom. And what I did was I closed off the back half of the RV, and I didn't even heat it during the day. So I would just leave the bedroom and even the bathroom closed off, and I didn't heat that at all. Of course, when I had to use the bathroom or go into the bedroom, it wasn't very comfortable, but I figured 98% of the time during the day, I'm going to be in the living room and kitchen, and I'm not even using the bathroom or the bedroom. So I was willing to deal with that discomfort for a few minutes a day, basically, maybe 10 minutes a day. And so then at nighttime, I would heat the bedroom, and I would not heat the living room, or I would just heat it very minimally at nighttime. Obviously, again, that's 8 hours of time you're spending sleeping. You don't need to keep your living room warm during that 8 hours. Of course, when you get up, it's going to be cold in the living room, right? So I figured that saved me about probably close to 30 to 40%, just that one strategy. So if you add that strategy to the other three strategies, you might drop your total utility cost by 60 to 70%. And for me, living in northern Alabama, I was able to keep my utility cost a little over $100 a month, like $125 a month. Okay. But that was being very stingy with the heat and just using it, when in the spaces that I used most of the time. So I think that's it for the video. I just wanted to point out those two major issues with living in an RV. And there are a lot of others, like you've got to find a spot to put it, but I think most people who are going to live in an RV, they've already figured out a place to put it, right? So anyway, let me know if you have any thoughts or ideas to add to what I said, or if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. I am going to start doing videos like this in the future that talk about other affordable housing options like yurts and tiny houses and tent camping and things like that. So if you'd like to stay up to date on my videos, you can subscribe below, and thanks for taking the time.